Hey, fun fact, but I lived in the United States as a Canadian for a number of years. Oh, please don't hate me for that. And while I've talked about that before, the issues of healthcare, for example, this video is about racism. To say that I experienced culture shock as a white boy from a small city in Ontario, Canada, transplanted into the US is the understatement of the century. I mean, there was only two black families that I knew of in my hometown in Canada. And then I find myself in southern Florida. I wasn't accustomed to seeing so many black people, but I also wasn't prejudiced by the history of racism in the US either. So it was what it was. Not to say that racism didn't exist in Canada or doesn't today, but at the time I was barely 12, so I wasn't exposed to it the way others may have been. But I remember being asked in homeroom practically on day one if I was a redneck. Now, I had no idea what that meant, but I sensed I was going to have to be if I wanted to fit in, so I said I was. And I remember going into a Kmart store, do you remember those stores? And seeing this poster. On it was this grizzled old soldier in a gray uniform proudly hoisting a tattered Confederate flag, and the caption underneath exclaiming, "Save your Confederate money, boys, the South gonna rise again." At the time, from that place of naivety, I just remember thinking it was a cool poster, not understanding its meaning. I saw the Confederate flags for sale too, and I had first seen it on the top of the hood of that classic 1969 Dodge Charger in the show The Dukes of Hazzard. I thought it was cool, the car and the flag. And that's how insidious in some ways that racism, or at least white supremacy, presents itself, isn't it? I mean, there was a primetime, popular TV show about these good old boys from Hazard County, Georgia, Bo and Luke Duke. You couldn't get any more all-American than those two if you planted a fresh baked apple pie on it as a hood ornament on the General Lee. Speaking of which, again, this subconscious perpetuation that General Robert E. Lee was a hero of the South. Anyway, I digress. These images, the flags and statues and culture of the South, all harkened back to a time when black people in America were slaves and reinforced that idealized time for white folks. But then I saw the darker underbelly of racism for the first time. A fight had broken out between a black boy and a white boy, and everyone encircled the two. I was sort of standing off to the side, away from the circle, observing. I'm a lover, not a fighter, and even back then that was true. And all the white kids were chanting. I listened, and it still haunts me to this day. The chant went, "Fight, fight, N-word and the white. The white don't win, we all jump in." And I've thought about that so many times in the 40 plus years since. I was too afraid to object at the time, too scared to stand up. But imagine being in that black boy's shoes. A boy of maybe 12 or 13, oppressed his whole life, undoubtedly in poverty, and realizing that if you don't win the fight, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you anyway. It had to be demoralizing, knowing you were done for either way. And I watched from my seat on the school bus many mornings on the ride to school as white boys hurled slurs and threw rocks at and otherwise picked fights with black kids. Flash forward a decade and a half and I'm heading to Atlanta for a work conference. I'm at one of those highway travel plazas with fast food, and I'm in line at an Arby's to get something to eat. In front of me is a black gentleman. It's his turn to order, and he steps up to the counter. The white female cashier deliberately leans to the side, makes eye contact with me, and says, "Can I help you, sir?" in the politest voice possible. I was dumbfounded, and I paused for a moment before saying back, I think this gentleman was ahead of me. And I point to the black man. Well, she looks, shocked, turns her gaze to him, sneers, and says, "What'll you have?" in just that kind of tone. He orders, pays, and waits. When she brings out his food, she basically hurls it onto his tray and dismisses him. As he turns, he made eye contact with me and he whispers a "thank you." And folks, some of you might be saying, well, that was 30, 40 years ago. Things are way different now. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. Certainly not in the South. But white folks have learned to hide their racism better, depending on the company they're in anyway. It hasn't gone away, it's just gone underground. They still talk about it over a cold beer or a hot meal. But that hate and anger towards black folks it's simmering just underneath the surface and ready to boil over. See this whole America First rhetoric? The ICE raids? It isn't really about American protectionism. It's not about patriotism. Not really. It's just become the outlet for that hatred of anyone who's not white. It's always been acceptable to be patriotic, though, even if it's no longer acceptable to be outwardly racist. I'll bet the chants no longer happen, and you don't see that Confederate flag flying around nearly as much. But they can wave American flags and exclaim their pride for God and country without seeming racist. They'll tell you they have black friends, that they're not racists, that they just love America and want to protect it. But see it for what it is. Racism, pure and simple. It's why too many disenfranchised people in America voted for Trump. He's openly racist and they wish they could be too. They want that old America back. They're saving their Confederate money in preparation for the South rising again. And they're prepared to start a civil war if needs be. Let's hope if they do, it ends the same way it did last time. But don't fool yourself into believing that eventually those old attitudes will change. They continue to pass it down generation to generation like a valuable family treasure. Talk about it over the dinner table, over fried chicken and hominy grits and biscuits with white gravy. Meals they abdicated from those black slaves many years ago. The glory days when America wasn't so woke and people weren't so sensitive. Telling their children and grandchildren to bide their time. Peace out. And if you're not already following me, you should. It's going to be a ride.